Phase 1 of the competition is underway. Last week, the judges selected 4 teams to move on. This week, more teams advance and more teams are cut on the Next Great Starship. Welcome to episode 6 of the Next Great Starship. We're here in Austin with all of our favorite judges.
Mark Skelton, art director here in Austin, Texas.
Dave Hobbins, concept designer in Santa Monica studio.
Chris Roberts, project director, Star Citizen, head of Cloud Imperium Games.
Chris Livia, chief visual officer for Cloud Imperium Games in Austin, Texas.
Well, you're chief visual officer, not just in Austin, Texas. But you are in Austin,
Yay!
Texas.
Really? All right. I didn't know that.
Chris Smith, lead vehicle modeler for Cloud Imperium Games.
Pretty good.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome because we're finally getting to see the teams actually work on the spaceships, and the concept phase is always the most interesting part of it. And we're also seeing these designs for the first time during the show, which in the past, when we went through all the submissions, we of course had to look at all the submissions. So we already gave our thoughts, so we'd seen them, and now we sort of discover the concept work as we're watching it, and that's kind of actually pretty interesting. So yeah, it's fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we see in this episode.
It's a lot more exciting now. We're seeing the whole ship instead of just a weapon, so it's a whole new ball of wax.
And there's a lot of promise so far too.
All right, guys, so we're going to see 5 teams today. 3 of the teams are going to go through, and 2 of the teams are going to go into the save pool. And they all got the mercenary gunship specs. Let's check those out. All right, guys, a lot's at stake. Are we ready? Excited?
Let's do this.
Ready to roll the videos?
I'm ready.
Ready and excited.
Ready.
Okay, let's roll the first video.
When we first received our design brief for the competition, the first thing I thought about immediately was the Mi-24 Hind because of its very similar role in history. So we started off with that, and then we branched off. We want to give the turrets as wide a firing arc as possible. So I tried to put them in a location on the ship where they had almost full hemispherical views from the ship position. We also thought it would be cool to have a drop pod that could detach and basically allow the ship to drop off the drop pod while slowing down. In terms of workflow, I did some ink sketches initially, then I did some drawing to Photoshop, then I passed them back and forth between my team and I, and then after that I did one of those detailed I did a detailed paint over to try to figure out what the final shape layout is going to be, but we still had some issues with the shape and we had some design things that we weren't very happy about. So I think it wasn't until the concept model when we finally figured out what kind of engine configuration we wanted. So that was one thing. We put together our final iteration 1 of our concepts. I really enjoyed the judges' feedback from last week. I just thought I'd let you know that, and we hope to see you in the next part of the competition.
That's not working. You can't do it. You gotta do it.
What do you want me to curl?
Look, he doesn't need to curl.
He doesn't curl. He doesn't curl water bottles.
Those are for wussies.
Chris Smith, what'd you think?
So I thought this was actually really good. You know, the design of the ship was cool. I thought everything, it seemed, was laid out pretty cool. They had the 2 turrets. You know, it looked like they have thruster placement in the right spots. There was a diagram with a lot of little detail bits, which I wasn't able to read at this point, but it looked like it was very well thought out, and I thought the design was pretty cool.
The only negative, it's a little bit, I think, over-exaggerated in some places. I think they can just tone it down as far as the boldness of some of it, but overall it's just beautiful presentation and really nice design.
I'm actually super impressed. So that's my favorite one to date so far of the concepts that we've had. I'm impressed. I mean, they've only had, I think, 19 days from when we told them what the specs to do that. Yeah, I sort of like the feel of it. The rendering style was really nice. Yeah, I'd like to sort of study some of the stuff a bit more because I didn't see the front thrusters so much, so I could see the back engines and how they would articulate.
There was one on the nose, like on the top.
Yeah, so I'd have to sort of look to see if that was in there.
I agree.
There was the two-man turrets, although the one on the bottom was kind of sort of flushed in there. Pretty damn impressive. They get my vote so far.
Right, thumbs up from the Chris couch. What did you think?
I liked it a lot too. I thought it was, kind of a daring design, a little bit of bird of prey with the forward swept wings extending from the rear, and then sort of the main fuselage coming forward. It's a bit of an ugly duckling in a way, but I like that about that because some of these things aren't attractive from the get-go, that they're very purpose-built and things are sort of added on and compartmentalized. And I like that. It gave it sort of a robust sort of feel. And there are a lot of World War II aircraft that aren't the sexiest things or the most streamlined, but they look like they can take care of the business. Yeah, exactly. They have a character of their own. And they become cool. And I feel that this really has that potential. I liked a lot of the surfacing, though I felt that there was almost too much, and it felt a few pieces needed to be unified and to move the eye around. But other than that, I thought fantastic job. Maybe just refine a few of the motifs and the exhaust and intakes and other things like that.
And I think if I was thinking back to my comments, I'd like to see maybe a little more inset or detail on how some of the pieces work, right? So I was mentioning the turrets, like they look kind of flush. Like how can I get a field of fire? Are they going to get in the way of other things? Where the landing gear? How does that deploy when you land?
And
just that kind of stuff.
Once they do like a previs on the 3D, they could do like a little blockout animation that could be fleshed out a little bit.
It was super cool for me.
The turret behind the rear cockpit. It seems like some of the muzzle flash would be right happening over your head. So some little shielding there that maybe the rear guy doesn't need as much observability. But
I like the broken neck. Like you're saying, it's kind of the ugly duckling, but that makes me want to love it more.
Yeah.
And I like the big engines. They look like if you were standing in front of those things, you get sucked right in them and like tore up. Those things are huge. The paint job was really nice too.
Yeah, had some good variation.
Yeah, I like the variation in it. It was weighted really nice. I mean, it feels like in the back, it's a nice chunk of ship, and then you've got the neck that comes down, which is, it had a nice flow to it. The detachable thing in the back, I haven't really seen that before. I mean,
it's kind of split up in the middle, didn't it?
That's very interesting. I'd like to see more, like maybe a block out of that, how it would animate, like click, click, like things like popping off and then it detaching.
It seems like that's sort of general theme of what we want to see more of, stuff like that.
I think we want to see more on the concept stage where we understand how the functionality works, because I definitely even know on our internal development, our first stuff, we were sort of like designing it and going, oh yeah, that's cool, and then we get it in to the game and we're like, all right, how do you get in the ship, or how do you sit in the cockpit, or
so figure that stuff out
how do
sooner
the
than
thrusters
later.
work? So now we're very focused on not just the form of it, but the function of it. It's different than games I've done in the past where you can sort of cheat it, but in this one we sort of have to do the industrial design up front as well as the actual, beauty design, so to speak.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, it was one of my favorites so far, for sure.
Well, a lot of positive comments for this one, but the competition is tough. Let's roll the next one.
My first ideas was that it was going to have to be grounded in some kind of reality, because the parameters were such that the dropship had to go through the upper atmosphere and land, obviously. So I thought it's going to have to conform to some kind of aerodynamics, depending on what kind of planet it's going to be landed on. The idea that I basically came up with in the end was a vehicle that drops from the underside of a mothership. And then falls in freefall mode in a kind of blind state with a front heat shield over the main visor that's covered, and then as it comes through the atmosphere, it then deploys its cannon arms. It's called the Shadow Manta ship. That was the name I eventually settled on, and the reason why is because it has like these sorts of praying mantis style arms that unfold from the side with cannons on. one of the ideas that I had just randomly was this bat unit. So instead of having the troops be dropped into a combat zone from the air, from the ground, sorry, they're actually dropped in from the air. So that means that you can potentially have like more troops. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the concept that I've came up with.
David Hobbins, you want to kick that one off?
Sure. I thought the sketches were really fun, and obviously he's done a lot of thought into the utility and various aspects of it, and even with the, the sort of single-person flight gear. I thought that was cool. The design is interesting. I feel like there needs to be a refinement on sort of between the big shapes and the smaller shapes. It was feeling almost handheld or toy-like. That said, I think it's a pretty cool direction. I just think it needs a little more refinement.
Mark?
Yeah, I like it. It feels like a submersible to me,
Right.
so it has a very aquatic feel, which is interesting. It looks like if you were to put some heavy fire on it, that because of its shape, that like the shielding would glance off of it. So it feels like, it almost feels like a special op ship, something that would be designed for a specific type of mission.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with David though, like some of the bigger, bulkier bits that come out, they seem like too big for what,
Like where would they go?
size should be. Yeah, and where they go. Like it seems like that arm that came out, it just feels, it doesn't feel like it's flowing with the ship quite
Right.
as well. It seems like it should be integrated in a little better, but I do like the design. I mean, it's very, it's very different than what we've seen so far. But yeah, I dig it.
Roberts?
So I feel like it's a cool design for an atmospheric dropship, but not particularly a great design for something that's in space. Also, size-wise feels too small for what the spec is. I mean, it should be carrying about 15 tons of cargo. It's going to have 2-man turrets. Essentially on that, there was this artillery piece that could, I guess, be manned by a crew, and the other one was an auto turret on the side, and I'm assuming there'd be one on the other side. So I do like that sort of shape. I mean, there was a couple of shots in the concept that was on the left-hand side that looked kind of cool. But primarily our game is going to be space, and then the ships can transition down into atmosphere. So it has some work for me before I would say, okay, that would work as a gunship as we're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the artistic style, and I like the idea of trying something that doesn't look like, say, we all think gunship, we all think Hind, we all think, that kind of stuff. And so this definitely didn't have that feeling and had some potential. I like the blast shield for re-entry
Right.
and stuff like that.
That was a really bold design. I think they took a chance going with that simple, sleek
Bullet.
shape up front. Yeah. But in the end, I think it needs. I think if that could be like the front piece of something bigger.
Yeah, it needs more mass.
Yeah.
And also just the engines also, like I'm like going, where are the
Yeah.
thrusters and the engines? So yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. If you had the front piece is something on a bigger kind of like
Right.
space gunship, that'd be pretty cool.
And it could be cool that maybe it detaches, from the rest of the ship at some point. But no, I mean overall it had a lot of potential, and it was really, like I said, it was a unique design. So
I agree. It seemed like it was like half of a ship, right? It was sort of the front, and then it needed like a big of a back, and yeah, maybe it was probably too small for the specs that we have. I did like, that sleek design sort of. Reminded me of like some sort of automotive design, like futuristic, with that little black sleek cover that he had. And I actually do like, it's sort of hidden, and then turret kind of pops out, and then the other things pop out.
I like the idea of deploying turrets from something
Right.
sleek.
Seems like it needs more, right? There's a little bit that it needs, like, to push it that extra inch.
All right, so it sounds like brownie points for a bold design and maybe some work in creating more mass and scope for it. Let's roll the next one.
Hey everyone, this is Team 4 Horsemen. We ended up with 10 thumbnails, and then we started cutting them up into pieces in Photoshop and basically sticking parts from one image into another with a basic shape for a ship in hand. Tobias started refining the Frankenstein of thumbnails into a more readable format with, reworking the shapes, adding details, balancing out the shapes, all that stuff. After that, we made a very rough block out to see if the shapes that we had in 2D, if they also work in 3D. For the interior, we wanted to have a bit more of a lived-in feel, because the crew lives there from day to day. It's their house, it's their home. So we wanted to have a small living area available to crew when they're not engaged in combat. Have a bench or two and a table for mission briefings or just occasional poker playing between the crew or whatever. We also embedded a cargo crane in the back of the ship into the tail for. Here's the more refined concept that is based on the blockout, so they actually match, which illustrates how we want to move forward with our ship design.
Chris Roberts, I heard a lot of comments from you.
Actually, this is my new favorite. I actually really, I don't know, I really liked it. I mean, I would say that my comments would not really be so much about, because it felt like a gunship to me. It felt really nice in some of those 3D views. My questions and comments would be more down on the engines and the thrusters, how they're moving and how they're working, because I like those big I think they're the thrusters or arms on the side.
Yeah,
but I'd have to actually spend some time and say, okay, well, is this, where are the four sort of TR3 engines in the back? Where are the 4 TR2 maneuvering jets in the front? Because it sort of felt like they combined some of those things. Maybe they didn't.
Are your thoughts on that? Like those small thrusters on the engines on the side, would they physically work in space as far as maneuvering it properly, or is there an amount of cheatability?
It's not the look of it. The look of it's cool. I love. If I'm just talking about literally the physical, because we are actually simulating these ships properly.
Right.
So the thrusters have to be placed in the appropriate positions that the ship can actually, because literally we'll put it into the engine, and if we don't have our thrusters set up correctly, the ship won't fly properly.
New favorite for you too, Chris?
It's close though. No, it's up there. It's a perfect example of how you got to trust the process sometimes, and how the process of concepting stuff out works, and as far as the initial silhouettes and sort of sketches moving into blocking it out, and then how sort of really thinking about it, putting a thought into it, could lead to a successful sort of finished design, and that definitely showed, successful design.
Really, the only comment or critique I would have would be, well, for one, possibly, figuring out where exactly the thrusters might be, so it flies correctly. But those big engines on the side, while they were cool and I like them, would maybe work on them a little bit more, because they seemed a little bit too blocky. For the rest of the ship was kind of a little bit more rounded or whatever, and it had this cool shape language, but these big things, it felt like big nose pliers to me, when it kind of went together and up, because they're so blocky and square, maybe you could chamfer off some one edge off of it or something, just to make it a little bit more cohesive for the rest.
I love the call-outs that he did for the interior. That was fantastic. As far as what room goes where and how they all fit together, and you could tell he thought out okay, right behind the pilots would be the engine room, so if something crazy happens, the engine room is right there. It feels like kind of a Gundam ship to me a little bit, with those the way that those
wanted to transform.
Yeah, kind of a transformer type ship.
The legs and
the legs of a Gundam ship, which is not bad. That's pretty cool. The only thing that's kind of weird to me is that if you just glance at the ship, it looks like a smaller ship than what it is. You know what I mean? If you look at the cockpit, how big it is compared to the rest of the ship.
I didn't feel that. I felt like you definitely felt the scale.
And that's minor, because if you're walking around that thing, then you're going to see it in full scale.
So was it the big plier things that made it feel small to you?
I think it's just the whole shape felt kind of was reminiscent of a fighter jet-ish. A little, just the hull. I'm talking about how it kind of tapered off, and you've got that fighter jet front, that kind of goes down into that cockpit area.
Those big side things throw the scale off a little bit, because it's big, simple shape.
Yeah. Right.
And that it looks like it could be, like in manufacturing, it's hard to do big, simple shapes like that without adding a lot of weight.
I thought it was extremely communicative, clear presentation, and Yeah, just obviously a lot of work went into this. Also, there was a variety in illustration style. Some felt, even if they were digital, there was still sort of like, you know, cool gray marker artifacts and gouache touches almost. At least it evoked that for me, which was, it was fun. It made the overall presentation sort of, you know, full of variety and interesting to look at. Design-wise, I thought it was pretty cool. That said, the large, you know, what did you call
Plier.
it? Pliers or whatever.
Leaf
You know, garlic press or who knows what. But it really, those read as a much smaller object than what they were. So for that, you know, I would, you know, say what you said about adding beveled edges and all that, you know, a little more sophistication, but also like a secondary form, you know,
Break it up into
the addition
like a,
of, I mean,
smaller
large,
thing.
complex things are rarely just boxes, but
Right.
well, other than skyscrapers, a whole bunch of things I can make counter arguments. But and I think some of the, although I overall liked the surfacing and design and graphic breakup of panels and thrusters, it still felt slightly soft, slightly cartoonish in proportion. But I think when they get into a more refined modeling pass, they're going to tighten up some of these edges, and it's going to come together great. So really good job.
All right, well, competition seems to be getting tougher. A lot of love for this one, but let's roll the next one.
I see the mercenary gunship as a viable, minimalistic, compact and very cost-efficient ship. As a style guide, I used the already existing ships in the Star Citizen universe. The floor of the cargo space has several purposes. It functions as a landing gear, but can also be extended for a quick cargo switch. The thick main hull gives great armor for the crew and the ship systems. The main challenge for me was to create the design only in 3D, without a 2D concept in that short time.
For the gunship, I decided to create a heavy hull design to assure that the ship will be able to resist enemy gunfire. In front of the ship and at the rear end there's one manned turret seat. When the gunship is approached for landing, the wings will rotate 90 degrees. During the landing phase, 4 small thrusters are based nearby the cockpit for more stabilization. On both sides are doors, 2 for cargo transport and 2 for the crew members.
Chris, what did you think?
About what?
About what?
Oh,
About Vision Cut.
It was, it was kind of, it was very ugly, and I'm trying to think whether it was ugly in a good way or bad. There's a lot of time spent in like making it all shiny with pretty lighting, or not even pretty lighting, but just like lights everywhere, and it was just.
Well, that's the second one. There's 2 concepts. So there's concept 1 and concept 2.
Which one do you like?
I disliked both of them equally. I think if they sort of think about the overall shape, I think it could be something a little bit better. But to me, it's just all I see is just an ugly ship, and I don't like it.
Chris,
That's okay.
That's okay. The first version I actually liked better than the second version. Even though, I mean, there was still something about it. I think the main thing that bothered me about it was every shape in that ship was just huge. Like there was no little big and small parts that convey a sense of scale. So everything was big and it looked cartoony. So it just looked like it was made for, like, you know, Toy Story movie or something. Yeah. It's just kind of.
We don't know if he like
or
even
Spy
got
Kids.
To, yeah, Spy Kids.
We
don't know if,
Buzz Lightyear would drive the ship.
If we were thinking that was his finished sort of like detail, or whether he was just waiting to do like the more detailed paint overs later.
Yeah, but even general shapes, you want to have small and big. You want to have variation. So everything. I mean, even on the interior, they had these security bars. They were like this thick around, right? I mean, you want little.
Yeah. Well, I think on the
stuff.
second one, the second one was much more guilty than the first one of like scale.
Now, one thing that was good about it was they thought about the thruster. I mean, the thrusters working, that was a cool thing, and they had the previous animation, which was awesome. Although I don't agree with in the first concept at least, where they had the whole ship lifting up from these like little platform. I don't know if that's even mechanically almost possible without huge hydraulic engines.
It seems like it would fall over.
It seemed fragile. So, I mean, some things, I liked some of the implementation of the technicality side of it, but overall, yeah, the ship design was fairly ugly. The second design was very non-pleasing to the eye. especially the silhouette with the wheels and the landing gear out.
So throw the second one out, but the first one I think would have some potential if it was getting worked on, because it certainly was it was stubby and ugly but aggressive, and it had those missiles and it had those guns, and I did like the way there was thought put into how the thrusters work, because that's something that we need to have done. I totally agree with Chris in terms of like the scale of stuff. So like those big thruster nozzles, it was almost like it was all that stuff was oversized, and I did feel like there was a little too much kind of cut and paste, sort of almost like, okay, we'll take the Constellation cockpit and then we'll add an element from one of the other ships on the back, and I sort of feel like it would be better to have that unified. But I do not mind like an ugly, functional, aggressive ship. What they should do is take the first one. They should look at, scaling some of the stuff a bit better, so it doesn't everything feels blown up or over exaggerated, but really sort of embrace the sort of aggressive, stubby side. And I do also agree with Chris that the whole it was a cool idea, but I don't think that seems very practical, where like the base of the hull sort of pushes the whole ship up, so to speak.
So if there was more mass to those structures that pushed it up, would that feel better if they worked on that, or is it just like that idea?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that just sort of feels... there was another element over the end where the engines rotated around and they had like skids on them, and that looked like that would work. So it just feels like that would rotate around for VTOL, and then in the front you would have some other version of other like thrusters that would rotate down for VTOL, and then it would land. That would be cool, and then the base could just drop down like it kind of does on the Constellation, and that would be fine. But I just don't think you're going to land on your belly and then your belly's going to push you up, kind of thing. It just sort of feels weird to me.
David Hobbins.
I really wish that, obviously this person's competent modeler and has put a lot of time into the presentation and the renderings and these animation sequences, and I wish I could take all that time out and put it back into the core shapes and proportions and the design. But I do think the first one is the one to move forward on, and although I would work on the sort of F-35 rear vector nozzle, I thought when animated in particular looked a little funny or odd, and so
it's also probably not very efficient in how it worked too.
They do have it on a real jet. That said, I might consider putting some sort of fairing or shielding, a piece that articulates with those as they move, that kind of make that motion and the silhouette, wherever it ends up, look more interesting.
Mark Skelton.
Yeah, I think if you could put a couple of balls on the inside of this and a big handle in the back, Fisher-Price, you'd have a sweet like toy. And it's like really stubby and very Fisher-Price. So if they took it and kind of slimmed it and pulled it a little bit, that might be a start of something cool. But yeah, honestly,
I don't think stubbiness.
I don't think it's the stubbiness. I think it's just the fact that you don't like all everything's big features, so that's why
everything, like especially when the landing gear was there, the landing gear was like right here and the ship was like right here, and it's like this big. Instead of like having it so wide, maybe thin it up and pull it this way a little bit. Definitely the first one was more interesting to me.
I wouldn't want to lengthen it. I would want to keep it sort of short, compact, like a flattened toad. And to me that says sort of like it's robust, it's compact, and it's easily maneuverable. It's something that could sort of spin on a dime. If if they were to make it longer, then it might suggest that it's
maybe the
faster, or
walls, I guess.
Well, I think it's like the thrusters, the engines, the little details, all the stuff that move. They're also just too big and overscaled, and so add it all together, it looks weird. Yeah,
it's like all the same size.
I agree.
Well, concept one, and a few reworks for that one. Here's the last video of the day.
We came to certain major points based on the technical description. It's supposed to shoot a lot. It's supposed to relatively loiter, allowing itself to shoot a lot. It's supposed to hold the punch or two while it's shooting. It's supposed to drop troops into the fray and then shoot a lot to support them. Based on these points, we started to work on the design. Exactly like that, function first, pure looks, well. Pure looks will have to wait for a bit. In a gunship, the pilot's sight and ability to acquire targets is key. However, after he has a target, what's the point if there is not enough firepower available at once to hit it? Our concept artist Karanak is known for incredibly detailed and clean concepts, but those Take time. Finding the right way to combine our workflow, well, I certainly hope we'll manage that.
I mean, Karnak, that guy's amazing. He's legendary. I mean, everything that I've seen of his has been amazing. The initial design, I like it. He's got a lot of firepower on it, obviously, which that is fantastic. He's thought through a lot of the systems and how they work together, which is great. Again, I want to see kind of a 3/4 of it. I mean, I didn't get to see that. I just saw, you know, the top and the side, which is cool. I can see a lot from that, but I just, you know, I'd like to see more of the detail work that he's thinking of.
I like all the thought and the layout and, you know, package architecture and this, that, and the other thing. But I might try to work the profile silhouette, the cockpit fuselage area. It felt a little rectilinear. I felt like it just, and I like that. It felt very bold and distinct. That said, I felt like it needed a secondary shape in the silhouette. It had a sort of retro feel, and in a good way. It was sort of, you know, paid homage to, you know, Ron Cobb and Sid Mead and you know, films like Alien, and it you know, it had sort of an 80s sci-fi aesthetic about it, and
Yeah,
I happen to like that aesthetic. It
Right.
just said I would be careful and maybe, and I know that this team is fully capable of pushing it, but I would like to see that push, because I saw some similarities with the shuttle that Sigourney's character.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
That drop ship that
The
she
drop
had at
ship
the end
in
of Alien.
Aliens.
Right, because it had that triangular.
Right. Now, obviously, they've done some new stuff to this, and, you know, I'm making no suggestion that they're copying. It just, you know, these things are all in our shared language.
Right.
And I always, when I see a team with this much talent, I want to sort of push them to go farther.
Chris Couch.
Chris Couch.
Yeah.
So I like the thinking and approach that went through it. I mean, talking out kind of like what they were thinking about, you know, where they would place the guns, what its function and what its role was going to be. And so the general layout and the design, I mean, I liked, you know, like I always go on about the thrusters because we need that for flight. And you could see on their design that they were like, okay, here's the front thrusters, here's where they pivot, here's the back ones. And that is actually the way it should work. So all those elements were great. I mean, obviously I'm a little disappointed that, you know, it was just there and wasn't taken to the next stage, which is what the Shimmerpan folks and the Four Horsemen folks did. But I think knowing what they did on the gun, knowing the talent behind them and seeing the work, and knowing that the form and the basics and thinking out where things like the reactor and all the rest is all there, for me, that puts them up there, but I want to see the concept finished out for me to, put them at the very front of the line, but I know they've got the talent to get there. I think they're on the right shape, and I would just like to see it sort of rendered out in more of the details. But yeah, it's huge amount of promise. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all see the potential, with that team. Just, I wish it was developed further. As far as their basic shape for the ship, I think to get it away from like the Sigourney Weaver dropship or whatever the escape ship was.
Yeah, the escape shuttle.
And he might end up doing this. It's at such an early stage that maybe he can break apart a lot of the just the big shapes in general.
Right.
Cut it open and start to see some interior areas in there to just break up the shape.
The weapon range was cool. I like when they do that and think about, since it is a gunship, how much range do you have with each gun and to protect your ship. And I like the shape language that they have too. It felt, the neck with from the side, it felt maybe a little bit like dinosaurish with the neck and the little head. But overall, great potential, and their concept artist is amazing. So, hopefully, they in the next iteration they can show us a little bit more.
All right, guys. Well, we had 5 quality teams today, so you know what time it is.
All right.
Get your phones out. Email me your top 3 teams.
Okay.
Good round.
And I'm going to tally the votes. Okay guys, results are in and 2 teams got 5 votes each. Congratulations to Team Shimapan and Troika. And now, Vision Cut got no votes, which leaves 4 Horsemen and Talon Corp. David Hobbins, seeing as you're the new judge, why don't you tell us who you voted for?
I voted for Talon Corp. Although I think I was hard on it during my critique. That said, I felt it was more original, and I guess I like to see designers take risks and do something new, but they've really got to tackle the obstacle of just the size of it just seems more of a handheld object. But I think if they can overcome that, and their explanations of why that is shaped that way because of the heat shield and other things, I think it could be a really unique dropship. Where I felt the other one, though it was more fleshed out, lots of work. This was a tough decision for me, by the way. It just felt a little safe and a little conventional.
Well, I'm sorry, David, because 4
Yeah,
Horsemen are
I
moving
bet.
on.
That's fine. I just wanted to,
Well, we were arguing about it earlier.
give them a chance. So,
Well, no, I mean, I think Talon was good too. I just, for me, 4 Horsemen was much more realized and fit the bill much better. So for me, if I was going to make that choice, it would be 4 Horsemen every day of what we had. Although that's not to say Talon couldn't turn around and change things with another pass at the design, which I think they're going to have a chance to in the save pool.
The community gets involved once again. At the end of phase 1, you guys will get to vote back in 2 teams. So all the teams will get the judges' feedback, they'll do another pass and put up their new video, and you guys get to vote 2 teams back in. All right guys, so we have 1 more week, 5 more teams to look at.
Woohoo!
Whoa.
You want excitement?
Before I can say that you're excited.
No, it's going to be cool. This week was great. I mean, I really thought the standard of competition was extremely high. Super impressed. Last week was good, but I feel like this week's kind of ahead of what last week was. So I'm really looking forward to seeing next week, and I'm then looking forward to seeing what everyone does in response to sort of feedback. That's actually always a really great test of a concept artist's skill, because it's not just coming up with a design and abstraction. You're usually coming up with a design to fit a bunch of parameters, and whether it's a game or a movie or something like that, generally there tends to be other creative feedback, and you have to respond and integrate that. And if you do a good job and do it well, that's a sign of a really great concept artist.
All right, on that guys, next week it's the final round of the concept art phase. We'll see you next Friday.
See you later.
See you next Friday.